Okay, so I've got this pulled up into Lightroom. So the two options were to edit this out, um, or to like make it look more like a sunset, sun flare type of photo to make it look a little more intentional. So let me show you really quick how I do the lighting for like the sunset one, and then I'll show you how I edit it out. So with this one, you're going to want to start by warming it up a bunch so that it looks like, well, it's obviously like in the evening. So you're just going to warm it up quite a bit. And when I do that, I also like to bring my highlights down quite a bit. You'll see in the background of the photo that just kind of brings back a lot of the blown out parts of the image. And then I also like to bring in some blacks. Just bring the blacks down, which adds more black to it. You don't want to do too much, obviously, and you don't want to take it all the way away. But I like to bring down a little bit so that it adds a little bit more black in there, just for a little bit of added contrast. Now that I've got that contrast in there and the highlights down, I'm seeing it looks pretty green. So I'm going to come up here to the tint and I'm going to add some magenta to it. Sorry, I've got allergies and I'm like hard to understand. Oh, okay, now we're going to scroll down and add a little bit of clarity. And then with the saturation, we're going to come back to that in just a second. Okay, so keep scrolling. You're going to come down here on this color panel, the HSL Hue Saturation Luminance panel. Click on all so that you can see all three of these at the same time. And these are going to this is going to adjust all your colors. So we're going to try that. The first thing you're going to do is come down here to Luminance. I like to bring, so you can see this filled back here is a mixture of greens and yellows, but the greens are really like neon green, which is not my favorite. So if you take your Luminance slider and pull the greens down, that's going to help balance out that really bright green. This works really well for like pictures that have grass in the summertime too. So you can see there's a lot more yellow in there, but as you pull it down, it's going to take away, this is, obviously you wouldn't do this, but it's going to take away all of the highlighted parts of that color. And if you pull it up, any of that color would add highlight to it. So by pulling it down, it's just going to kind of even that out a little bit and add, let me show you the before and after. So it's just going to add more detail back in. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take my red slider under the hue part, and I don't want it to be more red, I actually want it to be a little bit more orangey. And then I'm going to take the yellow slider and slide it back towards the orange just a little bit. And we're going to take the orange slider a little slightly more yellow. And then once we've got all that, we're going to come back up here to saturation and we're going to desaturate it a little bit. And that, what that's going to do is that's going to give us those warm tones without it being like over the top and making your eyes hurt. So that's the before, that's the after. You can see that just looks a little bit more like sunset. And then I'm going to save that out and I'm going to open it in a different program. Okay, so instead of opening this photo in Photoshop, I'm actually opening it in a program called GIMP, G-I-M-P. GIMP is an open source kind of copy of Photoshop. So another open source thing you're familiar with, I mean, you probably know what that means, but Firefox is an open source web browser. So open source is free. And GIMP, for a few things, I feel like it's a little bit more like user-friendly. So that's what I'm going to show you with on these, and I can show you Photoshop another time. Sorry, I have bad allergies and I cannot breathe. Okay, so what we're going to do is pretty simple. We're going to take this. I'm going to send you this so you can try it. This is just an overlay. A photo overlay is just, you're just going to take these like tones. So this kind of looks like a light flare. Um, and you're going to copy it. So Control C. Then you're going to go back to your photo. And this is going to seem a little bit confusing, but I promise you it's not. It's pretty easy. Hang on. Okay, so I'm going to take, I'm just going to, just sitting on this photo, I'm going to add a new layer. So you can do that down here by clicking this box with a plus, or you can click on layer up here at the top and click add new layer. And you're just going to leave everything as it is and push OK as long as it says fill with and the one that's selected is transparency. So you're going to push OK, and then you're going to come over here to this and you're going to do Control Copy, and then you're going to come back here and Control Paste. Now you're going to see over here on the right side that it's got the image, the layer that we just made, and then the copy. So you're going to come over here to the scale tool. That's the little box, arrow, big box. You're going to click on that and then click anywhere inside of the copied layer that we just made. And you're just going to click inside of it and then pull the edges to make it fit, to make it bigger than the photo itself. And then click scale. Okay. And then making sure that you've got this top one selected, you're just going to click this green anchor. And then you're going to right click on that, click add layer mask, make sure that white is selected, and you're going to push add. And then once you do that, you can come over here to mode, and you're going to scroll down here to overlay. And then when you click on these, everything under overlay, it's going to make this kind of a transparent layer, but it's going to leave some of that color. So you can see it more dramatic if I click hard light, if I click vivid light, pin light. You can see how all these different things add different looks to it, and you could use any of them if you wanted to, but soft light is the most subtle. But if I take that away, do you see the difference that makes? So there's without it, there's with it. It just kind of adds like a warm glow to the whole thing. Now, because we added that layer mask, you can come over here to this paintbrush, and I usually put it at half, but let me just show you what it does. So if you come to that paintbrush and you draw anywhere on the image, it is going to erase the top layer and show the bottom layer through. So if you felt like this was too like orange or red on their skin, you could erase it off of their skin or their clothes, and that you can kind of see in this little tiny preview. That's just erasing that part of that layer so you can see the layer underneath it. So I'm just going to undo that. And then I might put it down at like under 50, make my thing big, make my size big, and then just erase it off of their faces a little bit so it's not too much. And then you're going to go to image and flatten image. Now, I just remembered that there were like 2 other things in Lightroom that I was going to have you do. So I'm going to export this. When you're saving a photo, instead of doing save, you actually want to export it. So that's going to be Control-Shift-E or just File Export. And you're going to just save that. Yeah, to wherever you want it saved. And then you're going to go back to Lightroom and open it up, and I'll show you what to do next. Alright, so if I scroll all the way down to the bottom of this and go to Effects and the Post-Crop Vignette, I am going to add in a little bit of a vignette. Do you see how it doesn't affect the sky because the sky is so light, but I like how it added a little bit of shading on the sides here, so that the emphasis was more on them. So, oops, before and after. Do you see how like those sides, that's kind of like a personal preference. If you don't like it, don't do it, but what is happening here? Okay, there we go. And then one more thing you can do is if you use the adjustment brush. I don't know if you've done the adjustment brush. Let me just reset all of these. You probably do the adjustment brush, but it just lets you draw onto the image wherever you want, and then you can set all of your settings on here, all of these settings, just where you did that. So if you hover over it, you can see where you put the brush, and then if you adjust it, it only adjusts that part of the image. Do you see? So I usually like to, especially with backlit images like this, I like to add a little bit of white in to brighten it and bring a little bit of the blacks down, and then add a little exposure to kind of compensate for how bright the background is, to make sure that they're like properly exposed, and then bring the highlights down just a smidge and add some sharpness so that they stand out a little bit. So then you can see that's the one that we did in GIMP, and this is with those other couple of adjustments. So that's the first option of what you can do, and then let me show you the second option. Okay, so the second option is going to be to just Photoshop the sunflare out. This is kind of tricky, but here's a couple of little tricks that you can do to like reduce it. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on this dodge burn tool. It's just this circle with the line in it. It's like a lollipop or something, I don't know. You're going to click on that, and then dodge is to darken, and burn, oh sorry, dodge is to lighten, burn is to darken. So like if you think about wood burning, when you burn the wood it darkens it, and when you dodge parts then it doesn't burn it and it stays light. And you can dodge and burn highlights and shadows and midtones. So I never do it at 100%. I usually have it at about 75%, but you can definitely, if you look, if I just do these trees right here, I'm on dodge, so that's going to darken them up. And if you look here without, and then that's when I've done it. So you can see it does make a difference if you look at those trees. So one thing you can do is you can dodge his hair. You want to be careful to not dodge outside of that line. But you can do that to kind of soften it a little bit, but that's not a very like satisfactory way to do it because it still leaves that white line. The second option is to grab highlights, and that's going to, because it's like a brighter part, that's going to do it a little bit more. That you can see highlights affect like the brighter parts of the image. So they're not really going to do much in shadows, but they're going to affect the light parts. And then you could do the other option, you could do shadows, and you could burn the shadow, but you can see that didn't do a whole lot because a lot of him is not super shadowed. And if you look, that doesn't affect the sky at all because there's no shadows in there. But it would affect these areas where there is shadow. So that can be a fun thing to play with too. So that's the first option, is you can just try to burn some of that to like help bring back some of that color and texture. But it's not like the best way. Now, another way you can do it is to just kind of soften the line. So you're going to come to this stamp tool. This is called the clone tool. It's super helpful. You're going to do it like 50% opacity and just make it whatever size you need it. Now the way this one works is you just hold Control and anchor it on a place where you want to copy it. Let me show you if it's at full opacity. So if I anchor it on his eye, so that means just Control and then click right where you want and then let go of both. Then if I click on another part of the image, it's going to exactly copy or clone that part. And I can keep going for a long time. So I actually use this tool all the time when I'm doing, like when I'm slimming people down or when I'm editing things out of the background. It's an amazing tool. But for this situation, we're going to put the opacity lower, and then we're going to anchor it right where it's got the color that we want. And if you can come in here and start like drawing off of this. And that's just kind of softening up those lines. Then I'm going to anchor it up here because the lighting is, if you look, the lighting on his cheek is pretty different than the lighting on his forehead. His forehead's lighter. So you're just going to do short little strokes to kind of work some of that out. Do you see that? And that helped quite a bit. The challenge comes when we get to his hairline, because, so I'm just kind of gentle strokes here going along. But once I get to his ear and hairline, this is where it gets really tricky, because his hair is green from that overlay, or from that sunflower. We've got a teeny bit right here, so that can help a little bit. But let me show you. If you did this all the way through all of his hair, it would probably come out not looking very realistic. So what else? The other thing you could do, if I undo this, and you can play around with it. I'm not much of like an artist. Yeah, see that just, it gets so tricky. You put your opacity lower and your brush a little higher to make it a little more smooth. But it does just, it gets kind of hard. We fixed a lot of that. I mean, if you couldn't see this part, you wouldn't think twice about the coloring on his face. So one thing you could do is like fix it the best you can, and then do the dodge tool and just come in and dodge some of that out to darken it up a bit. The problem is it's not the right color. His hair still looks green even when we get it kind of the right brightness. I don't know, it's tricky. Yeah, I mean, I would probably just leave it, to be honest with you. I think I would just leave it. It's just going to be tricky to like get his ear right. There are like editing companies you can hire that you can try to have them fix it. But I mean, without spending a ton more time, this is like about the best I'm going to get it. Which is not terrible. I mean, you could leave it and then put like a sunflower over it or something, but honestly, I think your best bet is going to be to do something like this other one we did, where it's just like really warm colors and people aren't going to think twice about a sunflower because it just looks like the sun's right behind him. So if you do have another photo where you like took a step to one side or the other and the sunflower isn't on his hair, but it's about the same angle, I can show you how to Photoshop that. Like that would be an easy head swap, but it's really hard to like clean it up. So there you go. Okay, one more thing I just noticed. So when I did these other edits on this, it got his hair kind of the right place, the right like color tone. So we really could use this clone tool like we did on the other one, and just come in and kind of clean off some of this. And I bet we could get rid of it with this more dramatic lighting look without it being too obvious. I mean, like, you'll know because you're the one that edited it, but I don't know. It shouldn't be too obvious, I think, to anyone else. If you just kind of came in and cleaned up that, make that a little bit bigger, cleaned up that area like that, then it like doesn't look like he has anything on his head. Because that lighting kind of, like his hair still looks a little green right there, but I don't think anyone would ever notice. So that's another option. You could do that.